Good evening. I would like to call the February 12th, 2018 Bellbrook City Council meeting to order. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Mr. Edwards?
Here.
Mr. Greenwood?
Here.
Mr. McGill?
Here.
Mrs. Middlestetter?
Here.
Mrs. Seeger-Lawson?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Schweller?
Here.
Mayor Baird?
Here. Formal approval of the City Council executive session or regular meeting minutes of our January 22nd, 2018 meeting. Does any member on council have a correction or additions to the regular City Council meeting minutes of our last meeting?
No, Mayor.
Seeing none, the minutes are approved as written. Mayor's announcements. We have a couple things on the agenda this evening, and the first is a certificate of appreciation for Robert Gooding on the Historical Museum Board. Mr. Gooding, would you mind coming up here? And Mr. Gooding and I sort of go way back because I believe Mr. Gooding was at my parents' wedding. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. So we go way back.
Yes.
So thank you very much for coming up, and I'm going to read a short certificate of appreciation. Robert Gooding, Historical Museum Board of Trustees. Whereas Robert Gooding served faithfully as a member of the Historical Museum Trustees, and whereas Mr. Gooding was first appointed to the Historical Trustees in September 2001 and reappointed for subsequent four-year terms, serving until December 2017. And whereas Mr. Gooding was very conscientious in performing of his duties as a member of the Historical Museum Trustee and contributed significantly to its objectives to fulfill the agreement entered into by the City of Bellbrook and museum benefactors, Evelyn Brock, in 1965. Whereas Mr. Gooding has agreed to continue to serve on the Historical Museum Trustee as Trustees Emeritus, and whereas the Mayor and Council of the City of Bellbrook wish to acknowledge the personal sacrifice and the giving of time, talent, for the betterment of the community and the benefit of all citizens. Now therefore, the Council of the City of Bellbrook commends Robert Gooding for devotion to duty and exemplary service. Council, for itself, the City Administration, and the citizens of Bellbrook extends appreciation and very best wishes for continued success. And thank you very much for your service, Mr. Gooding. And we're going to give you this. Next on the agenda this evening, Police Chief Doug Daugherty, Police Report for 2017. He's going to give us our annual report. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Another great year, I think, on the Bellbrook Police Department. We've had some challenges this year. I think we rose to the challenge in all those areas, and I think we performed admirably. So we'll dig in here. As you can see, our DUS arrests down just a little bit. That's not indicative of our efforts in trying to get them, but you can still see that for 80, it's still a significant number coming through Bellbrook. Citations issued is down just a little bit. For warnings given, it's almost 3-to-1 warnings given, so I think that's important. We want to be able to enforce the laws, but we don't want to be punitive to people that are coming through town or to our own citizens. And we had 51 OVI arrests, which I think is still a pretty good number. As you can see, our traffic enforcement, obviously citations down. Written warnings remains at a pretty high level. And again, the DUS and the OVI numbers there are pretty good relation to previous years. So one of the things that I've been tasked with is making sure that we train the future people coming through, specifically for supervision. Sergeant Meade attended the leadership training in Buffalo, which is hosted by the FBI. It's a week-long school. It's a fantastic opportunity for a department our size to be able to attend a training of that magnitude. A lot of different agencies from Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York attend that, and it's a good networking ability and fantastic leadership training. So Lieutenant went the year before, Sergeant Meade last year, and Sergeant Salyers will go this year in 2018. As you can see, that our crime stats pretty much, as far as the big picture, remain the same. Drug-related crimes probably dominate that, but that is not necessarily a reflection of the problem that we see throughout the Miami Valley, but more so of doing stops and having people, have some drugs in their car, misdemeanor level, some felony, but that's just probably an indication of some good police work that the officers are doing and getting inside the cars. But as you can see, thefts remain a big issue for us. A couple weeks ago, you probably have heard about the rash of car break-ins that we had that struck Bellbrook, Waynesville, Centerville, Kettering areas. So we've been working with them, and I think we've identified a couple people that may have been responsible, but we're still working on that and not quite ready to do anything with that. But we have recovered a great deal of property that was taken. We worked with the local task force, and they were able to recover a firearm with us, and we recovered a stolen car that happened that night too, so that we feel happy about that. But I guess the big message that I would like to convey to everybody watching is please lock your cars. If you have anything important or valuable, please don't leave it in your car overnight. That would help us greatly. As you can see, our felony filings had a kind of a slow year last year in 16, but in 17 was kind of right back up where we wanted. So it's indicative of the work that Detective Vetter does, and puts us right in line, I think, with what we normally expect. And he does a good job in balancing patrol duties and his work as a detective. Okay, so last year in 2017, the state of Ohio required 20 training hours of every police officer in the state of Ohio. We were able to meet that continuing education requirement, and we're able to get some really good training in for all the police officers. This year, the training requirement has been taken away. There's not a mandate this year, so what we've decided as a staff, Lieutenant and I and the sergeants, that we're going to maintain our level of training and our expectation to keep it at 20 hours. So we're still having outside agencies come in and give us talks. We've had already this year investigator from the state Ohio auditor's office come in and give us an hour and a half talk on investigations and how they do their work and how we can mitigate ourselves as potential targets. And so that was very good training. So, and we're looking forward to this year. I think we have some good training this year, and be happy to share that with you guys as the training comes about, and I'll make sure that I convey that to you guys. Okay, so the training summary. All of our officers, we went through the BCI lab submissions training, and then communications and conflict training. That was fantastic. That was hosted by Kirk Keller from the Sheriff's Office. I attended a FBI conference in Reynoldsburg. Lieutenant Carmen, first responder safety, and then a law enforcement seminar at the Green County Prosecutor's Office later in the year. Sergeant Meade, FBI Officer of Safety Awareness, the Great Lakes Leadership Training, And Sergeant Salyers attended the risk management training, as well as FMLA, executive leadership for chief executives, some drug classes there, effective veteran, first responder training, and then he also attended the seminar hosted by the Greene County Prosecutor's Office. And then we had a couple officers go to the tactics in traffic, which teaches us, officer safety and things that we should be watching for and looking out for when we make traffic stops. Use of force analysis. I'm very proud to report that we rarely have to use any physical force. In fact, since I've been here, and now 4 complete years, I don't think we've had many more than what you see here today. Physical force and all that is just requiring someone to put their hands behind their back or direct their hands to get them handcuffed. But no OC, no ASP, no taser. Thankfully, no firearm this year. But that's pretty close to what we've had the previous 3 years. And I think I owe that to the training that we give the officers and to the sound decision making that the officers make when they're in a situation like that. Now, the good stuff. Community policing pictures. We had Officer Jones. She works with the academy and does an anti-bullying presentation to them every year, which is always well received. There's a picture of some superheroes there, and I think 3 people with costumes on. So that was at the National Night Out, I think, that they came down and did that. That was a lot of fun. Lieutenant Carmen and Sergeant Salyers were honored, one with a leadership and one with a life-saving award. We were here in May last year to do that. Officers assisted with the churches, the Easter egg hunt, which is a massive event, thousands and thousands of eggs, and it's just a great day for the community and everybody involved. An event that we do every year through the connection with the FOP, we do an officer FOP shoe program. So there's families that are identified in the schools, and then they'll tell us some children perhaps that might need some help with shoes and socks, and we take them to Payless, and then we pick out a pair of shoes for them. So there's usually a couple children from each grade, and then we take them up there, and that is, anybody that's ever done it is, it's very rewarding, and it's a feel-good event. Glad we do it. And last picture is our service recognition. Everybody that was here to do that. I think it's one of the great things that that happens here in Bellbrook, and there's a number of police, fire, and civilians in that picture, and I think it's a great way to end, to show that it takes everybody here to run the department and help run the city. So that's my report, and it's a small bit of it. Thank you.
Any questions on council for our police chief before we let him run away?
Chief, that's a good report. I'm happy with what you're doing. I'm especially pleased about your community policing initiatives. That's something that's been long overdue, and I think you're doing a good job with it, so keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a lot of fun to do.
I would say that this community is blessed to have the command structure and police officers that we do have in this city as we have right presently, because they're always there for us. They're here for the community, and they do display a great deal of professionalism in their duties.
Thank you. One of the great things that we do, and I didn't put it up here, but I'm sure I'll put it up next year, is the greeting the children before they go to school at both elementaries. There's not much that gets in the way of that for me. I always schedule everything after that, 9 o'clock in the morning or after, because I like to be up there in the morning and greet the children. So I've even been told by some parents that their children will oversleep and miss the bus on purpose just so they can come through the gauntlet and give us high fives in the morning. So, it's great. So the rest of the day, but that's the best part of it.
Chief, just a quick question.
Sure.
I know that there's like a new neighborhood watch thing that's on Facebook that's now got you all involved as well as Sugar Creek. I just thought maybe it's a good opportunity for you to talk about kind of the pros and cons of that. I mean, I know that the site sort of kind of took over, and then people started posting all kinds of other gossipy sort of things
Sure.
on there, and then that got reined in, so.
Well, we just had a meeting with the people that run that site a couple nights ago. Lieutenant Carmen and myself attended, and as I described it, I think it's the 21st century version of the Neighborhood Watch. I think it's kind of an ability for a lot of people to get on there and see things, and for us, it's a great opportunity to broadcast a message that we want to get out there, and we conveyed that message to them, is that what we want to do is be able to get out information that's clean and accurate and timely before people start commenting on it. But what I don't want to do is start getting into a tit for tat, or every person that's going to comment on there that I'm going to get on there. I said, the police department's not going to do that at all. So for us, it's simple. It's a great way for us to get a message out, to crime tips and things that people should be aware of. Lock your car doors, those kind of things. And we promised that every week we would put out some kind of information blast, tip-wise, to keep people in the loop. So in that regard, it's very good.
Chief, I noticed a lot of your training is geared towards working with other agencies. I like that. And when you know what other agencies and how they work, I think it helps. You got that little imprint in your mind, and you see
Sure.
something. And then I just have a question on the cameras. How are they working out? Are they what you expect? Or
Fantastic.
okay,
Very pleased with that. Lieutenant Carmen was instrumental in helping pick the camera that we have selected and used today. It was about 2.5 year process where we went through a number of cameras, and the city manager was kind enough to allow us to pick the one that we liked, and with all your support, it's been great. Now, we've had a couple officers, I can tell you, that were a little hesitant in the beginning, but if you were to ask them today, fantastic, because we go back and play a video, and maybe somebody said something that they did or didn't do, and the playing of the video completely vindicated them, which I expect completely almost every time, because we do the right thing when we're out there, and the cameras just prove that. So it's a great tool.
thanks. Good.
Any other questions on council? I'd just like to thank the chief and all the fire and police departments both for all their service to the city. We're greatly appreciative of that. I'd also like to comment, I do follow all the Facebook postings on the Facebook page. I do not comment a lot because you know how comments go. You start one and they go forever. But if there's anything important, I will make a call myself. So,
Sure.
And I do think it's good. It really keeps the all the residents of Bellbrook, Church Creek, and the surrounding area in tune on what's going on. And hopefully it enforces the need for people to not leave things visible in their car and keep their car doors locked and keep their homes locked.
That's great. So as many as the reports that we do get, there are many more that go unreported. So, but it's good. Anytime we can get a message out that helps the citizens and us do our job, it's great.
Well, thank you very much. You might as well stay up here. Next will be my honor to give the oath of office to a new police officer. So, Alexi Wilson,
Okay.
you're up next, and thank you very much for your service. And we will give your oath of office, and I'm guessing the chief will be pinning something on.
Well, we have actually, Lexi, if you'll come up here and stand. We have, before we get going, I just want to comment that her mom Lori's here, her sister Libby and Nina, Kyle, her boyfriend's here, Emma, daughter's here, grandparents Bob and Marilyn Wilson, and then her commander and assistant Mike Hild and Becky Bond are here. I think that's a really nice touch that they stay in touch and come here for that. Now her dad and her two brothers are out of town and couldn't be here, but without further ado, I'll have Lori come up as well as Kyle. And I will hand the badge to her mom. There you go.
You ready for me, Chief?
Yes, sir.
Alexi, would you please raise your right hand? And this is the oath of office, Police Officer Alexi Wilson. I, Alexi Wilson,
I, Alexi Wilson,
solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of Ohio,
of the State of Ohio,
and will obey the laws thereof,
and will obey the laws thereof,
and that I will,
and that I will,
in all respects,
in all respects,
uphold and enforce
uphold and enforce
the provisions
the provisions
of the Charter
of the Charter
and the ordinances
and ordinances
of Bellbrook,
of Bellbrook,
and will faithfully discharge
and will faithfully discharge
the duties of
the duties of
the office upon
the office upon
which I'm about to enter.
which I'm about to enter.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. And Alexi? No, you're fine. I didn't date mine here. What is the date one?
The 12th.
12.
That's great. Diversification. Yeah, diversification, no, that's good. That's good.
And does she need to sign? We got one more.
Yeah, that one's for the state. Got you there.
And I think I've got one more to go.
Just sign here.
Signature of appointee.
Yep.
I'll take it. Thanks, sir.
Alexi, thank you very much for volunteering, and I wish you all the best of luck, and I hope you'll enjoy the department. I think it's a bunch of good people, and we're very lucky to have you.
He's not volunteering. We're gonna.
Well, I know.
We're gonna pay you. Don't worry. We're gonna pay you.
Yeah, I know.
Certainly blow away, boy.
I was trying to work on our
No,
budget.
that's yeah.
Um,
Choose Bellbrook.
Yeah.
Thank you for choosing.
That is all I have for mayor's announcements, special guests. We have no public hearings this evening. Introduction of ordinances, we have none. Resolutions, we have 3. Resolution 2018-K. Mr. Greenwood.
Yes, Mayor. Resolution number 2018-K, a resolution declaring specific equipment no longer needed by the city of Bellbrook as surplus property and authorizing the city manager to dispose of said surplus property. Whereas the city of Bellbrook desires to maintain adequate equipment to be used by its personnel, and whereas equipment no longer needed for use by the city personnel may be declared as surplus property per Chapter 230 of the Bellbrook Municipal Code. Now therefore, the city of Bellbrook hereby resolves. Section 1, that the following equipment is hereby declared as surplus property: the 1995 Freightliner truck VIN 1FV6HLCB9SL578850. Section 2, that the city manager is hereby authorized and directed to dispose of said property in accordance with Chapter 230 of the Bellbrook Municipal Code. Section 3, that this resolution shall take effect and be enforced forthwith.
Yes, this piece of equipment was the rescue vehicle for the fire department. Back when it was acquired in 1995, we probably had enough volunteers and such that it could actually be used. This is like an auxiliary piece that can bring extra equipment to a scene if we need it. The reality is today we don't have enough people that could drive it to the scene if need be. So they've taken the equipment that was on there, they've reassigned it to different vehicles, whether it's an engine or whether it's one of our SUVs. So everything that was on there is used. But we no longer need the vehicle. It's a 20-plus-year-old vehicle. It's not worth the maintenance cost of it anymore. So we'll auction it for whatever that's worth and eliminate one of the vehicles from our fleet.
Anyone on council have any questions for our city manager on that? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt resolution 2018-K.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to make a resolution to adopt resolution number 2018-K.
May I have a second?
Second.
And roll call.
Motion by Mr. Greenwood to adopt Resolution 2018-K, a resolution declaring specific equipment no longer needed by the City of Bellbrook as surplus property and authorizing the city manager to dispose of said surplus property. Seconded by Mr. McGill. Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood?
Yes.
Mr. McGill?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter?
Yes.
Mrs. Seeger Lawson?
Yes.
Mr. Schweller?
Yes.
Mayor Baird?
Yes. Moving on, Resolution 2018-L. Mrs. Middlestetter.
Thank you, Mayor. The City of Bellbrook Resolution Number 2018-L, a resolution approving the record plan for the Highview Terrace subdivision, Section 3, Phase 3. Whereas, the City of Bellbrook Planning Board, after a comprehensive review, granted approval on February 6, 2018 for the record plan for Section 3, Phase 3 of the Highview Terrace subdivision. And whereas, the City of Bellbrook subdivision regulations stipulate that the signing of the record plan must be approved by City Council. Now therefore, the City of Bellbrook hereby resolves, Section 1, that Section 3, Phase 3 of the Highview Terrace subdivision, as shown on the final record plan, is hereby approved for recording purposes. Section 2, that the mayor and clerk of council are authorized to affix their signatures to the record plan. Section 3, that the developer shall file a copy of the record plan for recording in the office of the county recorder following the date of final approval by the planning board, and furnish the city with one print of the final recorded plat. Section 4, that the approval of said record plan for recording purposes does not constitute the final acceptance of the proposed streets shown thereon as public streets, or the acceptance of the dedication of any other public lands. Section 5, that this resolution shall take effect and be enforced forthwith.
Yes, this is the final phase of Section 3 of Highview Terrace. So these final 9 lots are at the end of the cul-de-sac on River Birch Drive. Once recorded, that will allow the developer to sell those. If you recall, at the last meeting, we approved Phase 2 of Section 3. But I think the demand is such that the developer is requesting to record these lots so that he can also sell these lots. So there are some other improvements that will be required before everything is finally accepted. At the end of the cul-de-sac, there is going to be a gate that connects over to the landings at Sugar Creek for emergency vehicle access. There'll be a sidewalk connection. There are some other items within the street. The final course of asphalt is not in the streets. There's some things that still remain to be done. But by recording this will allow the developer to sell those lots and move on with the development.
This has already been approved by the planning board also.
Correct.
Any other questions on council regarding this?
I just want to ask you, the breakaway gate, that's all settled and
Yes, it was
Agreed
part of
on.
the approved
Wait.
plan, and it's a requirement. So it has not been constructed yet, but it doesn't really make sense yet. I don't think that the other
Yeah.
side of the gate has been constructed or is finalized yet either. So between the two, it will be finalized with the grass pavers, and it'll be a locked gate, but emergency vehicles, public safety personnel will have the key to that to open it when necessary. Hopefully, it's not very often, but when they need it, they'll be able to use it.
And then maintenance of it's going to be done by what, the association? Is it?
The homeowners association ultimately will have responsibility for the maintenance of the gate.
Okay.
It'll be on their property. They'll have the maintenance responsibility. So if we'll probably check it periodically. Our service department will check it. They do that with the other gate that's around, just to make sure that it's functional, that the lock is able to be opened, the gate is able to be open. They'll put that on their probably quarterly checklist to make sure that can happen. If there are any issues, then they'll forward that on to the homeowners association to take care of.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
And as far as the, like, the runoff, I know there were some issues with drainage and stuff as they were developing that whole area of the loop and stuff around. It seemed like there was stuff coming down the hill.
When they were,
Figure that out.
yes, I think a lot of it was just the timing of that. It was in the springtime when there's some significant rains and that. But once they've finalized it and they've established some grass on there, that is all stabilized, and we haven't had near the issues once we made it through the fall time frame and that. So yes.
I think think that was on the other side of the plat anyway.
This isn't
From
quite
the-
as steep, this
Well, this
last
is like-
section, is it?
This
Right
is-
up against the back of those plots.
Yeah, there were a couple that it was coming down the hill
Down
because
the
there's a
hill.
couple of existing homes on the bottom side there that were, they've been working with those homeowners and at this point, I've not been made aware of any issues, outstanding issues with that.
And Mark, on the homeowners association responsibility with the
Oh,
gate,
Rich.
do we have any bonding or anything on that to make sure that if the homeowner association says we have no money in the account, the gate needs to be repaired, so we're not gonna be able to do anything? Or do you have language that's gonna protect us in the event of that? Because I know a lot of these homeowner associations don't really have much money in the fund at all.
Right. I would have to check. I'm not sure that that's required or what it is. I think ultimately if they didn't, we would remove the gate
Okay,
and it would just
okay.
be open.
That's a
and,
pretty good answer then. Yeah.
I don't think they would like that, because people would use it for a cut through. So ultimately, we need the access to it. So if it falls in disrepair and they are unwilling to repair it, then we'll remove it,
Remove it, okay.
declare it a nuisance and a public safety issue, remove it, and it'll be open. And I don't think that may prompt somebody to open
Okay.
their pocketbook a little bit.
Good answer, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
Any other questions from
Yeah,
our city
I'm
manager?
looking at this, this appears to be the final phase of the entire development.
It is. This
Okay.
is it. I mean, it is, I would say highly likely that you will, before this is through, you'll have a replat because somebody will want a larger lot, smaller lot line moved, something like that. So you will probably see that. But in terms of the record plan for all of the sections of Highview Terrace, this is the last record plan, and it's consistent with the preliminary plan that was approved a couple years ago, the revised preliminary plan that was approved by council a couple years
That's
ago.
what I basically looked like this, approximately the same shape.
Yes,
so-
yep.
Okay.
This is the
That's
last
it,
portion of
Unless he
it.
buys more land.
Yeah. Well, he owns land on
Other
just
side.
to the north, on the entrance there, but
But
that's
that's
it.
township.
That's in the township, yes.
Any other questions for our city manager? If not, may I have a motion to adopt resolution 2018-L?
I so move.
May I have a second?
Second. Good. Done. Okay.
And roll call.
Motion by Mrs. Middlestetter to adopt Resolution 2018-L, a resolution approving the record plan for the Highview Terrace subdivision, Section 3, Phase 3, seconded by Mrs. Seeger Lawson. Mrs. Middlestetter?
Yes.
Mrs. Seeger Lawson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood?
Yes.
Mr. McGill?
Yes.
Mr. Schweller?
Yes.
Mayor Baird?
Yes. Moving on, our last resolution this evening, resolution 2018-M. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution number 2018-M, a resolution approving the plating of lot number 3, Wilson Plat subdivision, section 3. Whereas the Ohio Revised Code sets forth the planning board as the municipal plating authority, and whereas the requested plat meets the requirements of the city's zoning code and subdivision regulations, and whereas the Bellbrook Planning Board has recommended approval of the plating of Lot 3, Wilson Plat subdivision, section 3, and whereas the City of Bellbrook subdivision regulations stipulate that changes to a recorded plat shall be approved by action of the Bellbrook City Council. Now therefore, the City of Bellbrook hereby resolves, Section 1, that the plating of Lot number 3, Wilson Plat subdivision, section 3, is hereby approved for recording purposes. Section 2, that the mayor and clerk of council are authorized to affix their signatures to the revised record plan. Section 3, that this resolution shall take effect and be enforced forthwith.
Yes, this is a request that was made by the Wilsons. As you can see here, they owned this entire plot of land. And over the years, they have subdivided. This is Spring Lakes Park here, just to give you a point of reference. Back in the late 90s, the Frymans built a home there. In 2006, the BZA approved a variance because since this does not have the required access to a public street, 40-foot access, each of these lots had to have a variance from the BZA. So there was one approved for the first lot, and then Lot 2 and Lot 3 were approved in 2006 by the BZA. Shortly after they were approved, the economy went the wrong direction and nothing was done. But back in 2014, another home was built using the variance, so we did a lot split for the Wilsons. Now they're requesting the final lot split that has been approved by the BZA for another home. The Wilsons are planning to build a home on that property there. and then the rest of it would remain with this original house there. They also own this parcel of land here. But the planning board did review this and approved the lot split based on the fact that it was approved by the BZA previously. Just to give you a sense, we define a minor or major subdivision as having 5 or more lots. This is now at 3 or 4, depending on if you include the original lot in that definition. They are aware that if they in the future want to develop more lots, they might have to meet the provisions of a major subdivision, which then is like what we've done with Hy-Vee Terrace. There's a whole lot more requirements of a major subdivision rather than somebody just breaking off a couple small lots here. From the point here, this is a public street to this point, and then it's a private drive. So it's similar to the situation we have up on Upper Bellbrook with that private lane. In some ways similar to Wentworth Village, where you go back into there. That's not private. Those are not private streets. Those are not public streets. Those are private streets. So it's sort of similar. They with the last approval in 2014, we required that they pave this, because at that point it was just a gravel drive. We required that to be paved, so it is still being paved. There is water access right there. There is a fire hydrant literally in the front yard here. So there's plenty of water from a public safety perspective. We have the access we need to any of these structures. There's no questions about water pressure. And there is a sanitary sewer line that cuts right through here. In fact, that's why these houses are positioned where they are, because of that sanitary sewer line. So there are no concerns from the city's perspective with the splitting of this Lot 3.
Any questions for our city manager? Seeing,
In the wintertime with snow, is that an issue with safety vehicles? Is there a planning, or do they plow it, or?
They would be responsible to plow it themselves.
Okay.
Probably no bigger issue than there are in like the other situations we have, like the Upper Bellbrook Lane. So we could, if it was an extreme situation and it was during a snowstorm, I'm sure we would have a city plow truck to go through there. If it's a fire vehicle, they're probably going to get in there. They might have problems getting back out again, but they're going to get in there. And the reality is, if it's a fire, I'm not sure that the fire vehicles are going to go down that far, because you're not going to, you don't park it next to the building that's burning. So they may be staging back up here anyway and just running their hose. So I don't believe it to be an issue. The fire department has reviewed this and hasn't raised any concerns with it. But that would be something that it would be their responsibility to keep it clear.
Okay.
any other questions?
I know because these are not public streets, we really don't have a say, but I mean, it looks like that new house is gonna go right on that street.
They're going to have to restructure the drive, and actually, and when we were speaking with the property owner, this house, the original house had it's a Ferry Road address.
Yep.
Because I don't know if you've ever been along Spring Lakes there, I mean, you can actually access that.
The gate's still there.
The gate's still there. I don't think many people use it, but they can do it. So that's what they said, but they would more than likely reconfigure this drive, because yes, right now, the way it's situated, it's gonna go right through where they're gonna wanna put a house, so.
But that's up to them.
That's up to them, and the
They're
owners of
not-
this house are the ones potentially building this house for themselves, so. And then whoever, if they were to ever sell this house, they would obviously have to provide some type of access for them to get to that property, so. It's more of a private property issue, but it was discussed with them.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt resolution 2018-M?
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2018-M.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
And roll call.
Motion by Mr. Edwards to adopt Resolution 2018-M, a resolution approving the plating of Lot Number 3, Wilson Plat Subdivision, Section 3, seconded by Mr. Greenwood. Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood?
Yes.
Mr. McGill?
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter?
Yes.
Mrs. Seeger Lawson?
Yes.
Mr. Schweller?
Yes.
Mayor Baird?
Yes. Moving on, city manager's report.
Yes, each year at the beginning of the year, we go over, police department, we're here for their annual report. We cover some other statistical things throughout the city. The fire department will be here to present their annual report at the February 26th meeting. One of the areas we'd like to cover is waste collection. We do have a contract with Rumpke for our waste collection. But just to give you a sense of the volume of trash that's created within the city of Bellbrook and how it's broken down. So about 80% of it is waste and the other 20% is recycling. And just to give you a sense of the history, that's fairly consistent over since 2010, always in about the same amount. But if you think about it, when you look at this and the number of households, each household generates almost 1.2 tons of waste every year on average. Of that, slightly less than a ton is waste that actually goes to the landfill, and almost a quarter of a ton is recycling that can be recycled. So that is a fairly significant amount. But when you see on the next slide, our average recycling per household at 0.24 tons far exceeds most of our neighbors.
Wow.
The garbage tonnage is about the same. The total is a little bit less for some of these communities, but our recycling, I think in Greene County, and I don't have them on here, Yellow Springs has a much higher recycling rate, but they're the only community within there. Beaver Creek does not have a single hauler. It's everyone can contract with whomever they want, so there's multiple haulers, so it's not mandatory recycling, or it's not, you pay for your recycling separate, so I'm sure that has an impact there. Fairborn and Xenia do have that, but you can see that their recycling rate is significantly less. And the other thing is what we are charging is $13 per month for the service. Beaver Creek, because you contract with that, I know from personal experience, if you contract with a private hauler, you're probably paying $23, $24 a month for that same service. Fairborn's just over 18, Xenia's at 15.65, and Centerville's at 18. So I think our residents have a pretty good bargain with the rate and the service. I think we've had very good luck with Rumpke, and we just began another 5-year contract, so we'll have some consistency there with Rumpke. So that's a good thing. Also, the Upper Hillside project, I think we talked about it the last time, but it is scheduled to begin on March 5th, weather permitting. We did send a letter to all the residents of that area, telling them specifically who the contractor was going to be. There are really 3 phases. There's the water main installation, which is going to be primarily in the roadway that they're going to be working, but there'll be times that it'll be down to a single lane, but the contractor is going to work with that. We contacted the school transportation department. There's just 1 bus per day that goes in and 1 bus per day that goes out. So we'll work with them. We know what times those are, and the contractor is very aware of the need to make sure that traffic flows. Once they're complete, that will take about two months to complete the water main. There's almost a mile of water main that's going to be installed. Then they'll come back and they'll have to go back. That water main will be pressure tested and tested for everything to make sure it's acceptable. Then we'll be doing service lines, and we'll have to go back and dig up for every house, all 113 houses in there. We'll dig back up, tap the main, run a new service line either to the outside meter pit, which about 70 of them have an outside meter pit, and the other 40 have inside meters. So for those, we're going to have to put a meter pit in the ground, and then we're going to have to remove the meter from inside the house. Our crews will be the ones that will be removing the meters from inside the house. The contractor will do everything else with the outside meter pit and running the service line up to adjacent to the house where that goes. Once that's all complete, then the last phase is resurfacing that. The contractor is aware the completion date is before school begins in August. So we are allowing them to start earlier. The original date was a June 1st start date because we wanted everything to be done while school was out. But after talking with transportation and the needs, it made more sense it's actually less disruption to the residents, because if you had all that going on at one time, there'd be a lot of traffic in and out of there. The contractor has actually been working with the cemetery to provide a staging ground for their materials back through there. So a lot of that won't actually be coming through the plat. It'll be coming through the cemetery land to the south there. And I think they've come up to an agreement, a financial arrangement, and some work that needs to be done with the cemetery. So that's a good thing for the development, or for the plat there too. So that will be getting started here shortly, and it's a project. It's a $1.1 million project. It's a very big project that needs to be done, but it's going to be a lot of disruption up there in the short term. So we will have an inspector on site. For the water main part of it, we'll use our engineer contractor to inspect that as it's going in. He'll be up there every day that they're working. When they get to the service line installation, one of our crew will be up there for all of that. Our crews will be the ones that will be when they turn on the water from the new high-pressure system, our crews will be the ones that are doing that on a house-by-house basis, so that we can find out if there's any issues. I anticipate we're going to hear things. We are significantly increasing the pressure. We're going to hear things like about water heaters. We're going to hear things about water softeners, things like that. Our stance now is we're not responsible for that. We're doing an improvement. We're responsible for getting the water there. So I just want council to be aware that that's what's going on. And when this begins to happen, you may hear some of that, but ultimately that's their responsibility, and it's extremely difficult to measure going in, what status those appliances or systems are before you go in there. So
Would that be something that would be covered by homeowners insurance, though, if they had possibly?
potentially, but I
No.
doubt, unless they had some type of, maybe if they had a home warranty
If they have a home
potentially.
warranty, maybe.
But yeah, it's, so,
I think the one thing people could do is, if they're really concerned, is you can install a pressure regulator inside your own home at your expense to bring it down if you're worried,
and we're not putting the pressure at such a high pressure, it's a normal pressure, but it's just
Right.
going to be higher than.
Their stuff's not gonna be used to it.
Right, and their pressure is extremely low right now.
Yeah.
They by far have the lowest pressure in the city, because they're on a low pressure system, and that they're at one of the higher points. They're at the highest point on the low pressure system. So we're also during this going to make a connection to Pavilion Lane. They're also on the low pressure system. They're a little bit lower, so they don't have quite as low a pressure, but we can just connect to them, and they will also benefit from the high pressure line that we put down Main Street here a couple years ago. So really at that point, the only plats that will still be on the low pressure system will be Streamview and Lower Hillside on that side, and then the downtown area. But most of them don't have pressure issues because they're low enough. It's just as you go up the hill is where you begin to experience that. So that will be underway. That's a big project, but I think we're prepared for it, and we'll keep the residents informed. If they have any questions, they're more than welcome to contact us. The last thing I have is I put a draft of the levy postcard in front of you. That won't get mailed out till probably, I think spring break for Bellbrook is the first week of April. So my thought would be that it would be mailed right after that. I don't, but I just wanted to get that in your hands. It's a little bit different than, it looks similar, but the wording is different. So just when you have the opportunity, please take a look at that. And if you have any questions, or if there's anything else that you want to have included, please let me know by early March, and we'll get it going. That is all I have today.
Any questions for our city manager this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to committee reports. Service?
No official report tonight, but I do just want to say thank you and great job to the service department for keeping our streets clean. I think that we've had a lot of snow this year compared to years past, and I know I haven't heard many complaints from people. Have you had?
I have not either, no.
It seems like they're doing a great job,
Yeah.
and I know that they're using a lot of salt.
Salt, but that's why we have it, so.
We have a lot, so we still have a lot.
Yeah, we still do, but yeah.
But, yeah, they're doing a great job.
Yep.
Safety,
No reports.
finance and audit.
Mary, the one report I was going to make is that we've been notified by the Ohio Audit Department that they're going to start our audit presumably on February the 5th. So they started something? Or
Yeah, they did. They're
Just the initial
actually on
meeting?
site right now, so.
And their completion date is said to be fieldwork May 15th, and the report should be out June 30th. So we'll anxiously await the issuance of the report.
I'll believe that when I see it.
See ya.
Last year, what, October?
October, I believe,
Yeah.
yes.
So they at least start out with the right dates. We'll see if they can stick to them. So other than that, nothing else to report.
Community fairs.
We have one item, the final vacancy on a board, the museum board. We are recommending that we bring on Shane Russell. He's a highly recommended by folks from the Historical Society who know him. He's very interested in the local history and very well qualified to add his expertise to our historical board. So put that into nomination for bringing him on board.
So that's a motion. May I have a
That's the
second?
motion.
Second the motion.
And roll call.
Motion by Mrs. Middlestetter to appoint Shane Russell to serve on the Museum Board of Trustees, seconded by Mr. McGill. Mrs. Middlestetter?
Yes.
Mr. McGill?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood?
Yes.
Mrs. Seeger Lawson?
Yes.
Mr. Schweller?
Yes.
Mayor Baird?
Yes. Moving on, old business. Is there any old business? New business, we have one issue on new business this evening. Mr. Schlagat?
Yes, each year in February, we take a look at the water rates, look at where they are currently and what the recommendations are going forward. So that is, I have a quick presentation on that. Just to give you some perspective on the amount of production from our water plant. So for 2017, it was just under 300 million gallons of water was produced, very similar to what it was in 2016. 14 and 15 were lower years because those were wetter years in the summertime, so there was not as much irrigation used. And you can see 2012 was the last time we had a mini drought there, and that went up to 325 million gallons. So of that, I mean, you look, we produced 299 million. We actually billed for 258 million. So where's the rest of it? Every time we flush hydrants, if there's a fire, there's a lot of things that happen that water gets wasted. So it's about a 10% waste there, which is typical for this type of thing. But it does prove that we are billing for most of the water that goes through our system. The number of meters that we actually bill continues to grow as the developments, particularly in the township, Hy-Vee Terrace also, the vineyards, those continue to grow. Hy-Vee Terrace, the vineyards, each of those have generally 2 meters because they have an irrigation meter on top of a regular meter. The landings primarily is just a single meter, but we are growing with the number of accounts or the meters that are being billed. Our average quarterly usage from a domestic meter is fairly consistent. Again, in 2015, probably a little bit lower because for people without irrigation systems, they weren't watering their lawns with sprinklers and watering their plants as much. But it's usually right around the 13,000 range is what a typical household uses on a quarterly basis. For irrigation, this is on an annual basis. So last year, an irrigation customer that had a separate irrigation meter used about 75,000 gallons of water. Again, I only have the history here for a few years, but you can tell in the years where irrigation systems weren't used as much, that number is a little bit lower. Our revenue for the water fund has been consistent the last 2 years at just under $1.5 million. 2012, again, that was a year that we had the most billed water, so that's where that peaked up. Those years preceding that were also fairly high. But our revenue is pretty consistent, and at that 1.5 million, that's what we project. Our balance with that has continued to grow. At the end of 2017, it's at just under $2 million. But the Upper Hillside project is an example of why that's money needed. That's a $1.1 million project. About half of it, $600,000, is a grant. Another quarter of it is a loan, but that's a loan that has to be repaid over 30 years, and then the rest of it has to come out of this fund. So that's why we need to accumulate that as our water system ages. We need to make sure we have that money in place that we can replace those water mains that are aging before they become major issues. So just to give you an overview of how our water bill is calculated, for the first 1,000 gallons per month, 3,000 gallons per quarter, you're charged $8.90 for each 1,000 gallons. After that, you're billed $3.90 for each 1,000 gallons. So for our typical usage, it's $8.90 per month. And then if you're using 4,500 gallons per month, it's another $13.65. So that's $22.55 per month, or $68 per quarter. That's for 13,000 gallons of water. So if you track that back to what a gallon of water, a case of water costs at Costco, that's a pretty good deal for 13,000 gallons of water. So, and again, our annual water bill has remained consistent since 2011. We've had no increases since 2011 was the last time we had an increase. And in the survey of other local governments, we keep getting higher or lower, whatever your perspective is. We have our water bill has remained constant, and everyone else continues to increase, and we get lower on that rating there. The other big component is tap-in fees. You can see from 2009 to 2012, we had very minimal tap-in fees. In 2017, we had 202,000 in tap-in fees. And I can tell you that last week we got a check for 203,000 for the Waterford development on Feedwire there. So they paid all their tap-in fees at one time. So we've already exceeded the total for 2017. We knew that was coming. Honestly, we thought some of it would come last year, but it has come. The landings continue to pay tap-in fees as those homes get built. White Oak Landing behind Walmart there, there's new taps coming in there. So our tap-in revenue, which is one-time revenue, but it continues. That's what's helping that fund balance grow also. So ultimately, our recommendation for 2018 is no increases. We don't see any need to increase our rates for the monthly base charges or the base rate after those monthly things, after the monthly minimums, or an increase to the irrigation. We bill irrigation on a straight usage basis at $4.75 per gallon. And no reason to increase the tap-in fees. I think our future of our water system is very positive, and we'll have the resources to take care of the issues that we need in the future, not just today.
Any questions for our city manager? I know most of us on here know this already, but it's good to send it out to the public.
Mark, what's on the horizon for any new increases to the water department? What would we do next? I mean, it seems like we're pretty much there for right now, unless we got EPA standards that would come out and change things. But
A lot of the stuff in the short term are going to be EPA changes that we need. We've got to do some mapping, some inventory, asset inventory things that will require some things from the EPA. Beyond that, the service department is always aware of. I think the Upper Hillside is a huge project. So once that's done, we'll probably identify the next area that has aging infrastructure that needs to be replaced. We'd like to do that in conjunction with a resurfacing project, if we can. But there are areas, probably mostly in the downtown, but there are areas with the transite water main, which is great if it's in the ground and undisturbed, but as soon as it gets disturbed, it basically falls apart. So we'll identify those areas that we have a significant number of main breaks, and look at those areas too and say, okay, it's probably time to go back in and replace that so we're not constantly maintaining it.
But nothing really big on the horizon as far as
the Upper Hillside is really the biggest one, and that's always been because of the combination of the age of the pipe, but also the low pressure. So once we're done with that, and then by tapping into Pavilion, we're really sort of killing two birds with one stone there, and we're going to get all that done. So
Okay, good, thanks.
Mark, is there any coordination when you plan a project like that? If you're going to replace water lines, would you like contact gas companies?
So in Upper Hillside, the gas company is currently doing some replacement in advance of what we're doing. Even for ourselves, we have a storm sewer lining that we're going to do prior to the contractor coming in to do this work, to do that for the same reason. And I did contact Greene County Sanitary particularly for Upper Hillside to see if they had any work. Actually contacted them before we did the grant application, because we thought if we could do a joint application, but they had cameraed those mains and had no issues, so we didn't do anything. But yes, we do.
Okay.
We try to coordinate it so that somebody's not coming back in after the fact, right after we're done, and cutting it back open and doing something different. We avoid that if possible.
Right. And you always see an example of that every once in a while.
Yeah, unfortunately. But no, we try to avoid it if we can.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for our city manager? Seeing none, we'll move on to open discussion. Anyone have anything for open discussion? Nick?
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Forrest?
I just like to shout out to the service department employees. They've done a great job. They've had a tough time this year with the weather, as we all have. Both areas of snow plowing and water mains, that's part of it, but they've done a superb job. And I just like to thank them for what they do, because what they do is not easy. It's tough on the body, and snow doesn't really come from 8 to 5, so thank them very much. That's all I have.
On down.
Same comment, Mr. Mayor. I think the city service department has done an exceptional job during the 2 recent storms that we've had, and it's good for the residents here.
Same thing. Thank you, guys.
Nothing.
Nothing for this evening, Mayor.
Just echo what they said. Because,
The other thing I'd just like to mention, obviously everyone saw what happened in Westerville over the weekend, and
Yes, yes.
the police department, I would say Westerville, although it's larger, it's very similar demographically to what we are here. And the police department never knows what they're going to go in on. It's a simple 911 hang-up call, simple. Obviously, you can see what it turns into. So, I mean, what they do, everyone thinks, oh, it wouldn't happen here. I read some post somewhere that, on Saturday, Westerville was that other place. So it could happen anywhere, and I, give credit to them for doing what they do every day. Most of the time, it's mundane and it's routine, but it can turn, unfortunately, deadly very quickly.
and I would agree, and if you know where Westerville is, it is a very nice area. It's very similar to Bellbrook, probably even newer in a lot of aspects of sort of those modern communities up by Dublin. So I'd echo that also. I just also like to thank the service department, and that's all I have. This is a time for anyone in the audience who would like to get up. Louis? Okay. Does any other member on council have any other business to come before us at this meeting this evening? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.